The scalding liquid hit her skin before she could even process what was happening. Esther gasped, the burning sensation spreading across her chest as the dark coffee soaked through her uniform. Her hands flew up instinctively, and in that chaotic moment, their eyes locked. Time seemed to fracture. The bustling café, the rain hammering against the windows, the chatter of customers, all of it dissolved into white noise. There was only him, standing there with horror etched across his perfectly sculpted features, designer suit dripping with the same coffee that had drenched her. And in that single suspended heartbeat, neither of them realized that their entire world had just shifted on its axis. But let's rewind. Let's start from the beginning, from before the coffee, before the collision, before everything changed. Esther Michael had never been the type to sit around waiting for life to happen to her. At 25 years old, she was a force of nature wrapped in melanin and determination. Her deep brown eyes held stories of resilience, and her smile, warm and genuine, had a way of making strangers feel like old friends. She wore her natural hair in intricate box braids that swung past her shoulders, and despite working herself to exhaustion, she moved through the world with a grace that came from knowing exactly who she was. By day, she balanced accounts at a modest firm downtown. By night, she crafted lattes and cappuccinos at one of Chicago's most upscale coffee houses. Money was tight, dreams were expensive, but Esther refused to compromise on either. It was a damp Tuesday evening in mid-autumn when fate decided to intervene. The café was packed wall to wall with professionals seeking refuge from the downpour outside. Esther moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, her fingers dancing across the espresso machine while she hummed a melody under her breath. She had just finished constructing an elaborate vanilla latte when the entrance doors swung open with unexpected force. Lee Jae-hyun entered like a thunderstorm in human form. Standing at 6'3" with jet black hair styled with precision and features that belonged on a runway, he commanded attention without seeking it. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Esther earned in half a year. But what caught her attention wasn't his obvious wealth or striking appearance. It was the raw frustration radiating from him as rain cascaded off his expensive overcoat. He looked like a man who had reached the absolute limit of his patience. Jae-hyun was the youngest president of Hyun Tech Industries, a global technology empire valued in the billions. At 30 years old, he possessed everything material wealth could provide. Yet, his existence felt hollow. He had just walked out of a disastrous negotiation where his business associates attempted to manipulate him, treating him like a fool simply because of his age. Furious and mentally exhausted, he had instructed his driver to pull over at the first establishment they encountered. He needed something authentic, something untainted by the duplicity that seemed to permeate every corner of his professional life. Esther observed as Jae-hyun approached the register, his phone pressed against his ear as he spoke rapidly in Korean. His tone was glacial and authoritative, the voice of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. When he finally reached the counter, he didn't acknowledge her presence. He simply stated, "Espresso, black, immediately." Then he returned his attention to his phone conversation. Esther felt her eyebrow arch upward. She had encountered difficult customers before, plenty of them. But something about this man's dismissive demeanor struck a nerve. Still, professionalism was her trademark. She prepared his espresso exactly to specification. Strong, scalding, pitch black. As she set it on the counter, she said in her most pleasant voice, "One black espresso for the gentleman who apparently left his courtesy in the car." Jae-hyun's head snapped up from his device. For the first time, he actually registered the person serving him. His obsidian eyes met Esther's warm brown ones, and something inexplicable occurred. The universe seemed to hold its breath for just an instant. He had anticipated another intimidated employee who would cower at his presence. Instead, he found this woman standing before him with a subtle smile playing at her lips, completely unaffected by his attitude, her gaze challenging him directly. Before Jae-hyun could formulate a response, his executive assistant burst through the entrance, calling his name with urgency. Distracted, Jae-hyun grabbed his espresso and pivoted sharply. Too sharply. The scalding liquid erupted from the cup, drenching both Esther's uniform and his expensive suit. Esther inhaled sharply as the hot espresso soaked through her clothing, and Jae-hyun froze completely, his eyes widening with genuine alarm. "My apologies," he said immediately, and Esther noticed his entire demeanor had transformed. The coldness had evaporated, replaced by authentic concern. He seized napkins from the dispenser and, without considering the implications, began attempting to help her clean the mess. But in his haste to assist, his hand inadvertently made contact with her waist, and they both became absolutely still. Esther's pulse thundered so loudly she was certain the entire café could hear it. Jae-hyun's hand remained on her waist, and his face was so close to hers that she could distinguish tiny amber flecks in his dark eyes. For a breathless moment, neither moved. The crowded café, the rain drumming outside, the curious customers, everything vanished except the two of them standing there, connected by an accidental touch that felt anything but accidental. "I need to change," Esther finally managed to whisper, shattering the spell. Jae-hyun stepped backward quickly, his professional mask sliding back into position, though his ears had flushed a telltale shade of crimson. "Of course. I'll compensate you for the damage and replacement uniform." He hesitated, seeming uncertain for perhaps the first time in years. Esther's supervisor materialized, concerned about the disturbance. When he identified a clearly affluent customer involved in the incident, he immediately launched into apologies. "Sir, please accept my sincere regrets about this situation. Allow us to—" "The fault is entirely mine," Jae-hyun interrupted firmly. "Completely mine." He extracted his wallet and placed several crisp $100 bills on the counter, far exceeding the cost of coffee and a replacement uniform. "For the inconvenience and for her." He looked at Esther one final time, his expression inscrutable. "I genuinely apologize." Before Esther could utter a word, Jae-hyun turned and exited the establishment, his assistant scrambling after him. Esther stood there dripping with espresso, clutching the excessive amount of money and wondering why her heart refused to return to its normal rhythm. Her co-worker Destiny rushed over with enormous eyes. "Girl, do you have any idea who that was? That was Lee Jae-hyun, the billionaire president. His face is literally everywhere, magazines, business journals, everything." Esther glanced down at the money in her hands, then at the entrance where Jae-hyun had disappeared. Something whispered to her that this wouldn't be their final encounter. She was absolutely correct. The following evening, Esther arrived at work to discover a package waiting with her name on it. Inside was a brand new designer uniform, significantly nicer than the cafe's standard issue, and a note written in elegant script. "Please accept this as my sincere apology for yesterday's incident. I trust the espresso caused no burns. Respectfully, J.H. Esther's heart performed a small somersault as she read the message. She told herself it signified nothing. Wealthy people probably distributed expensive gifts regularly. It didn't carry any special meaning. But then Jae-hyun returned to the cafe. And the day after that. And the day following. Each visit, he ordered the identical black espresso. Each visit, he lingered slightly longer at the counter. Each visit, his icy CEO facade seemed to fracture a bit more when he looked at Esther. And each visit, Esther found herself anticipating his arrival through those doors, even though she insisted to herself that she shouldn't. On his 6th visit, Jae-hyun didn't depart immediately after receiving his espresso. Instead, he settled at a corner table and opened his laptop, working for hours. Esther noticed he had positioned himself with a clear view of the counter, a clear view of her. And every time she glanced in his direction, she caught him observing her, and he would quickly redirect his attention to his computer screen. It was endearing, truly. This formidable billionaire who commanded respect and sometimes fear from everyone else, behaving like an awkward teenager in her presence. During her break, Esther prepared herself a chai latte, and before she could second-guess the impulse, walked directly to Jae-hyun's table. You realize, if you're planning to occupy this table every evening, monopolizing the space, the minimum you could do is experiment with something besides black espresso, she said, placing the chai latte in front of him. Jae-hyun looked up at her, clearly surprised. I have no preference for sweet beverages, he responded automatically. Have you actually tried them? Esther challenged, settling into the seat across from him without requesting permission. Her heart was racing, but she maintained a steady voice. Jae-hyun stared at the chai latte as though it might attack him. Then slowly he picked it up and took a cautious sip. His eyes widened fractionally. This is pleasant, he admitted, sounding almost betrayed by his own palate. Esther laughed, and the sound made Jae-hyun's chest feel warm in a way completely unrelated to the chai latte. You see, sometimes you must try new experiences, even when you're convinced you won't enjoy them. Is that your philosophy? Jae-hyun said softly, his eyes locked on hers. Something in his gaze made Esther's breath catch. They both understood he was no longer discussing beverages. That evening marked the genesis of something neither could fully explain or control, a connection that would alter both of their lives irreversibly. Over the following 4 weeks, an unusual routine developed between Esther and Jae-hyun. He appeared at the café every evening without exception, always ordering his black espresso, but actually consuming the various drinks Esther created for him. They would converse during her breaks, discussions that began superficially but deepened with each passing day. Esther discovered that Jae-hyun wasn't merely a cold corporate executive. He possessed a dry, unexpected sense of humor. He was remarkably intelligent, passionate about technological innovation and sustainable development. He had relocated from Seoul to America at 22 to expand his father's enterprise, transforming it into something far more substantial. But he was also profoundly lonely. Despite being constantly surrounded by people, he felt invisible. They only perceived his wealth and influence. Jae-hyun learned that Esther was working multiple jobs to finance her education. She aspired to become an entrepreneur herself someday, perhaps launching her own patisserie. She loved literature, particularly poetry, sang when she believed no one was listening, and possessed a fierce devotion to the people in her life. She sent financial support to her mother and younger brother monthly, consistently prioritizing others above herself. You exhaust yourself, Jae-hyun told her one evening as he watched her navigate the busy cafe. Says the man who's on his laptop until past midnight every single evening, Esther countered with a smile. That's different, Jae-hyun protested. How exactly? I'm uncertain. It simply is. But he was smiling too, and Esther noticed he had a dimple in his right cheek that only appeared when he genuinely smiled. Their colleagues and regular customers began observing their connection. Destiny would tease Esther endlessly. That man is absolutely smitten with you, she would whisper. The way he watches you, girl, that's not casual interest. Esther would deny it, but her heart knew the reality. She was falling for Lee Jae-hyun, and it terrified her. Everything shifted on a Saturday evening. The cafe was closing, and Esther was the final person cleaning. She assumed everyone had departed, but when she turned around, Jae-hyun was standing there observing her with an intense expression. You startled me, Esther gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. I assumed you had left. I instructed my driver to wait, Jae-hyun said quietly. Esther, I need to ask you something. Esther's heart began racing. There was something different about Jae-hyun tonight. His usual control appeared to be slipping. He took a step closer to her, and she found herself backed against the counter. Why do you treat me like I'm ordinary? Jae-hyun asked suddenly. Why aren't you intimidated by me? Why don't you behave differently because of my wealth? Esther tilted her head, confused. Why would I? Wealth doesn't make you superior to anyone else. It simply makes you wealthier. Jae-hyun laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Everyone else behaves as though it does. They either want something from me or they're too intimidated to be genuine with me. But you, he took another step closer, you challenge me, you tease me, you treat me like I'm simply a person. That's because you are simply a person, Esther said softly. A person who happens to possess substantial wealth, but still simply a person. Esther. Jae-hyun said her name like it was something sacred. He was so close now that Esther could detect his cologne, something expensive but not overpowering. I cannot stop thinking about you. I come to this cafe daily not for espresso, but to see you, to hear your laughter, to speak with you. I understand we're from vastly different worlds. Jae-hyun, Esther interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. Don't say things you'll regret. I mean every single word, he said fiercely. His hand reached up slowly, allowing her time to retreat if she chose. When she didn't, he gently tucked a loose braid behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and Esther's eyes fluttered closed at his touch. I've never experienced these feelings for anyone. You make me want to be better. You make me feel genuinely alive. Esther opened her eyes and found Jae-hyun staring at her with such raw emotion that it stole her breath. This is insane, she whispered. We barely know each other. You're a billionaire president and I'm just… Don't, Jae-hyun said sharply. Don't diminish yourself. You're not just anything. You're Esther. You're brilliant and compassionate and strong and beautiful. And you have absolutely no idea how extraordinary you are. Esther felt tears threatening at her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever made her feel valued beyond her utility. Jae-hyun. Go on a date with me, Jae-hyun said suddenly. A proper date. Allow me to take you somewhere special. Let me demonstrate that this, he gestured between them, this connection we share is real. Esther wanted to say yes so desperately it physically hurt, but fear restrained her. What if it doesn't work? What if your family disapproves? What if it does work? Jae-hyun countered. He took her hands in his, and Esther noticed they were trembling slightly. This powerful man was nervous because of her. What if this is the beginning of something extraordinary? Esther, I'm not proposing marriage. I'm simply requesting one date, one opportunity to show you how I feel. Esther looked down at their joined hands, her brown skin against his lighter tone, their fingers intertwined perfectly. It felt right. Frightening, but right. All right, she whispered. One date. The smile that illuminated Jae-hyun's face was like dawn breaking after a long night. He squeezed her hands gently. You won't regret this, I promise. As he departed that evening, Esther touched her cheek where his fingers had been and wondered what she had just committed to. She didn't know that upstairs in his penthouse apartment, Jae-hyun was pacing restlessly, his heart racing with excitement and terror. He had been in relationships before, but they had never meant anything substantial. This meant everything. The following day, Jae-hyun sent a car to collect Esther. She had objected, insisting she could take public transportation, but he was adamant. When she arrived at the restaurant he had selected, her jaw dropped. It was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind of establishment that required reservations months in advance. Jae-hyun, this is excessive, Esther whispered, as they were escorted to a private table overlooking the city lights. Nothing is excessive for you, Jae-hyun said simply. He pulled out her chair himself, his hand lingering on her shoulder for just a moment. The dinner was magical. They discussed everything, their childhoods, their aspirations, their insecurities. Esther learned that Jae-hyun's parents had separated when he was young, and he had matured feeling like he had to prove his value by being flawless. Jae-hyun learned that Esther's father had died when she was 16, and she had become the pillar in her family, always caring for everyone else. "You're permitted to need someone too," Jae-hyun said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You don't have to be strong constantly." Esther felt something break open in her chest. She had been strong for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer to share the burden. After dinner, Jae-hyun brought her to a private rooftop garden that belonged to his company's headquarters. Under the stars, with the city spread out below them, he pulled her close. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity," he said quietly. Esther looked up at him, her heart in her throat. "Thank you for truly seeing me." Jae-hyun's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "How could I not? You're all I see." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Esther didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him more than she had wanted anything in a long time. When their lips finally met, it was soft and sweet and perfect. Esther's hands came up to rest on Jae-hyun's chest, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jae-hyun rested his forehead against hers. "One more gesture like that," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "And I won't restrain myself. I'll fall completely, Esther. No turning back." Esther smiled, her eyes shining. "Who says I want you to restrain yourself?" And in that moment, under the stars with the city lights twinkling around them, they both knew they had found something rare and precious, something worth fighting for. The following weeks felt like a beautiful dream Esther was afraid to wake from. She and Jae-hyun began dating officially, though they attempted to keep it private. Jae-hyun was concerned about press attention making Esther uncomfortable, and Esther worried about people assuming she was only with him for his money. They discovered ways to spend time together away from scrutinizing eyes. Jae-hyun would collect her after her late shifts, and they would drive around the city discussing everything and nothing. He taught her Korean phrases, laughing when she mispronounced them. She introduced him to soul food, bringing him to her favorite small restaurant where the owner, Miss Betty, took one look at them together and gave Esther a knowing wink. "That's a quality man you've found," Miss Betty told Esther while Jae-hyun was away from the table. "I can see it in his eyes. The way he observes you like you created the heavens. That's genuine love, sweetheart." Esther blushed, but she couldn't stop smiling. It felt real to her, too. Jae-hyun was different from anyone Esther had ever known. He was thoughtful in unexpected ways. When he discovered she loved reading, he had rare editions of her favorite books delivered to her apartment. When she mentioned missing her little brother's soccer matches because of work, he secretly arranged for her supervisor to give her those evenings off. And when she was stressed about an upcoming exam for the online business course she was taking, he stayed awake with her until 4 a.m, helping her study and making her laugh when she became too frustrated. But he was also learning how to be in a genuine relationship. One evening, Jae-hyun attempted to settle Esther's student loans without informing her. When she discovered it, she was livid. "You can't just solve everything with money, Jae-hyun," Esther said, her voice sharp with anger and hurt. They were in his penthouse apartment, and it was their first real argument. "Do you understand how that makes me feel? Like I'm a charity case? Like I'm something you need to fix?" Jae-hyun looked stunned. "That's not what I intended at all. I simply wanted to help. I hate watching you exhaust yourself." "But you didn't ask me," Esther said, her voice breaking slightly. "You just decided what was best for me. That's not how this works. We're supposed to be partners, equals." Jae-hyun ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "How can we be equals when I have all this wealth, when I can solve problems with money?" "We're equals because I say we are," Esther said firmly. "Because we respect each other. Because we listen to each other. Money doesn't make you better than me, Jae-hyun. And me not having money doesn't make me less than you. I thought you understood that." The words hit Jae-hyun like a physical blow. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "You're correct. I apologize. I'm so accustomed to fixing things with money that I forgot. I forgot that you're not a problem to be fixed. You're perfect exactly as you are." He took a step toward her hesitantly. "I'm still learning how to do this, how to be with someone who actually matters to me. Please be patient with me." Esther's anger melted away. She could see the genuine regret in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed anyone else. "I need you to see me, Jae-hyun. Really see me. Not as someone who needs rescuing, but as someone who's already strong on her own." "I do see you," Jae-hyun said fiercely, closing the distance between them. "I see your strength every day. It's one of the things I love most about you." He froze suddenly, his eyes widening as he realized what he had just said. Esther's heart stopped. "What did you say?" Jae-hyun swallowed hard. They had been dating for 7 weeks. It was too soon. He knew it was too soon, but the words had escaped and he couldn't retract them. Didn't want to retract them. "I said I love you, Esther. I know it's fast and perhaps I'm insane, but I love you. You don't have to reciprocate. I just needed you to know." Esther stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. In her entire life, no one outside her family had ever said those words to her. And here was this incredible man, this powerful president who could have anyone, telling her he loved her. "Jae-hyun?" "It's all right," he said quickly, though his voice shook slightly. "You don't have to." "I love you too," Esther interrupted, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "I think I've loved you since you spilled espresso all over me and actually apologized. Since you looked at me like I mattered." Jae-hyun let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He pulled Esther into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "You matter," he whispered into her hair. "You matter more than anything." They stood there wrapped in each other's arms, and Esther felt safe in a way she never had before, like she had finally found her home. But reality has a way of intruding on even the most beautiful moments. The next week, Jae-hyun had to attend a major business conference. His mother was flying in from South Korea for the event, and she wanted to meet Esther. Jae-hyun was nervous in a way Esther had never seen before. "She's very traditional," he explained as they sat in his car outside Esther's apartment. "She has expectations about who I should end up with." "You mean she won't approve of me?" Esther said quietly. "I don't care if she approves," Jae-hyun said firmly, taking Esther's hand. "I love you. That's what matters. But I won't lie to you. She's going to be difficult. She can be cold and critical. I just need you to remember that her opinion doesn't change how I feel about you." Esther nodded, trying to ignore the anxiety building in her chest. "All right. I can handle difficult." But meeting Mrs. Lee was harder than Esther expected. The woman was elegant and beautiful, wearing clothes that cost more than Esther's car. Her eyes were sharp and calculating as they looked Esther up and down, taking in everything from her simple dress to her natural hair. "So, you're the girl my son has been squandering his time with," Mrs. Lee said in perfect English, her voice cold and dismissive. "Mother," Jae-hyun said sharply, his hand tightening on Esther's. "Esther is not a waste of time. She's—" "A coffee shop worker," Mrs. Lee interrupted. "I did my research. 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, no family wealth or connections. Tell me, dear, what exactly do you bring to my son's life besides being a distraction?" Esther felt like she had been slapped, but she lifted her chin and met Mrs. Lee's eyes directly. "I bring honesty. I bring respect. I bring love. Things money can't buy." Mrs. Lee's lips curled into a cold smile. "How naive. Everything can be bought, dear. Even love." She turned to Jae-hyun. "I'll give you 1 month to end this situation. After that, I'm cutting your access to the family trust and removing you from the company board. Choose wisely." She walked away, leaving Jae-hyun and Esther standing there in shocked silence. "She can't do that," Esther whispered. Jae-hyun's face was pale but determined. "She can. The company's shares are in a family trust until I turn 32. She controls it until then. When do you turn 32? In 18 months. Esther felt sick. Jae-hyun, you can't give up everything for me. Your company, your future. You are my future, Jae-hyun said fiercely, pulling her close. Esther, look at me. I don't care about the money. I'll start over if I have to. I'll build something new, but I'm not giving you up. But your dream. My dream was always to build something meaningful, something real. He cupped her face in his hands. You're the most real thing in my life. I won't lose that. Esther kissed him then, pouring all her love and fear and hope into it. Jae-hyun pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist as he deepened the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jae-hyun rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out, he whispered. Together. Esther nodded, but fear still clutched at her heart. She had seen enough movies and read enough books to know that love didn't always conquer all. But as Jae-hyun held her tight, she chose to hope anyway. The month that followed was the hardest of Esther's life. Mrs. Lee launched a campaign to break them up that was both subtle and vicious. Suddenly, Esther found herself being followed by photographers. Articles appeared online suggesting she was a gold digger. Her co-workers at both jobs started treating her differently, some jealous, others pitying. The pressure was enormous. Esther's mother called her, worried about the attention. Baby, are you certain about this man? Her mother asked. Is he worth all this trouble? Esther thought about Jae-hyun, about how he held her when she was sad, how he made her laugh, how he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Yes, Mama, he's worth it. But Mrs. Lee wasn't finished. She offered Esther money, a substantial amount, to disappear from Jae-hyun's life. When Esther refused, she tried threats, suggesting she could make Esther's life very difficult, could get her fired, could ensure she never got into a good college. Esther was scared, but she was also angry. She had worked too hard, overcome too much to let anyone bully her. So when Mrs. Lee called her to a private meeting at an expensive hotel, Esther went. But she brought Destiny as backup and recorded the conversation on her phone. You're stronger than I anticipated, Mrs. Lee admitted when Esther arrived. Most girls would have taken the money and disappeared. I'm not most girls, Esther said quietly. And I love your son, really love him. Not his money, not his status. Him. The man who worries about homeless people on the street and volunteers at children's hospitals and stays up late helping me study, even though he has important meetings the next day. That's who I love. For the first time, Mrs. Lee's cold mask cracked slightly. And when that love isn't enough, when you have children and they're mocked for having a mother who was a waitress, when Jae-hyun resents you for costing him his company. He won't resent me, Esther said with more confidence than she felt, because I won't let him give up his dreams for me. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Mrs. Lee said flatly. I control everything until he's 32, and I will not approve of you. Ever. Esther took a deep breath. This was her plan, the one she and Jae-hyun had worked on together. Then we'll wait. 18 months isn't forever. Jae-hyun and I will work on building something new together. Small at first, but ours. And when he turns 32, he can decide what he wants to do with his family's company. But either way, we'll have each other. Mrs. Lee stared at her for a long moment. You'd really wait 18 months? In this day and age when most people can't commit to 18 days? For Jae-hyun, I'd wait forever if I had to. Something shifted in Mrs. Lee's expression. She was quiet for a long time, studying Esther with new eyes. Finally, she said, My husband, Jae-hyun's father, he loved me like that once, before the money and power changed him, before our marriage became a business arrangement. She stood up, her expression unreadable. I'll think about what you've said. Esther left that meeting not knowing if she had made things better or worse, but 4 days later, everything changed. Jae-hyun burst into the café during Esther's shift, his eyes wild with emotion. She agreed, he gasped, clearly having run from his car. My mother, she's not cutting me off. She said she needs to see if we're serious, but she's giving us a chance. Esther nearly dropped the cup she was holding. What? Why? I don't know exactly, Jae-hyun admitted, but she said something about you reminding her of herself when she was young, before life made her hard. And she said anyone stubborn enough to stand up to her might be exactly what I need. Esther laughed, tears streaming down her face. Jae-hyun vaulted over the counter, literally jumped over it, and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around. Her co-workers clapped and cheered, and Jae-hyun didn't care who was watching. He kissed Esther right there in front of everyone, and she kissed him back, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. I love you, Jae-hyun whispered against her lips. I love you so much. I love you too, Esther whispered back. So much. That night, Jae-hyun took Esther back to the rooftop garden, where they had shared their first kiss. The city lights sparkled below them like stars, and the real stars twinkled above. He held both her hands and looked into her eyes with such intensity that Esther felt her breath catch. Esther, these past few months with you have been the best of my life, Jae-hyun said, his voice shaking slightly. You've taught me what it means to really love someone, to see them for who they are, not what they can do for you. You've made me want to be better, to do better. Jae-hyun, what are you? Esther started, but her voice died as Jae-hyun got down on one knee. I know it's fast, he said quickly, and I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, but I want you to know that this is forever for me. You're forever for me. He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing the most beautiful ring Esther had ever seen, a deep emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds. Esther, will you marry me? Someday, when you're ready, will you promise me forever? Esther was crying too hard to speak. She nodded frantically, and Jae-hyun's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He stood up and slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was filled with promise and passion and love. When they pulled apart, Esther laughed through her tears. An emerald, not a diamond. Diamonds are what everyone expects, Jae-hyun said softly, brushing away her tears with his thumbs. But you're not like everyone else. You're rare and precious and unique, like an emerald, like you. Esther pulled him down for another kiss, and this time Jae-hyun's arms tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss deepened, and Esther felt herself melting into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-hyun's eyes were dark with emotion. One more gesture like that, he said hoarsely, echoing his words from weeks ago. And I really won't restrain myself. Esther smiled up at him, her eyes shining with love. Good. I don't want you to restrain yourself anymore. I want all of you, Jae-hyun. The good, the bad, the messy parts. All of it. You have it, Jae-hyun whispered, resting his forehead against hers. You have all of me. Forever. And under the stars, surrounded by the lights of the city where they had found each other, Esther and Jae-hyun held each other close and dreamed about their future, a future they would build together, one day at a time. 7 months later, they had a small, intimate wedding. Mrs. Lee attended and even smiled during the ceremony. Esther's mother cried happy tears. Destiny was the maid of honor and made a speech about how she knew from day one that they were meant to be together. But the most magical moment came during their first dance as husband and wife. As they swayed together, Jae-hyun whispered in Esther's ear, "Thank you for spilling espresso on me that day." Esther laughed, that same bright laugh that had captured his heart in a café months ago. You spilled espresso on me, remember? Did I? Jae-hyun grinned. Perhaps I did it intentionally. Perhaps I knew even then that you were going to transform my life. Smooth talker, Esther teased. But she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. Only for you, Jae-hyun said softly. Only ever for you. And as they kissed, surrounded by everyone they loved, both Esther and Jae-hyun knew that this was just the beginning of their forever. Their story didn't end with a wedding. It was really just beginning. Esther continued her education, and with Jae-hyun's support and encouragement, she eventually opened her own patisserie. Jae-hyun was her first investor, but he made sure everyone knew that he invested because her business plan was brilliant, not just because she was his wife. The patisserie became hugely successful, known for mixing traditional Korean pastries with soul food flavors in ways no one had tried before. Jae-hyun, true to his word, built something new alongside his family's company. He and Esther started a foundation together that helped young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds get their businesses off the ground. They called it the New Beginnings Foundation, and it changed thousands of lives. Mrs. Lee eventually became one of Esther's biggest supporters. She would visit the patisserie every week and even learned some of Esther's recipes. "You were right to fight for him," she told Esther one afternoon over tea, "and he was right to fight for you. You make each other better." Years later, when Esther and Jae-hyun sat on their porch watching the sunset, their fingers intertwined, Esther would think back to that rainy day in the café. She never could have imagined that a spilled cup of espresso would lead to the greatest love of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Jae-hyun would ask, noticing her smile. "Just that I'm glad you were rude that day," Esther would tease. "I wasn't rude," Jae-hyun would protest, just like he always did. "You absolutely were, but I forgive you." And Jae-hyun would pull her close, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "You already have," Esther would whisper back. "You already have." Their love story proved that when two people truly see each other, truly respect each other, and truly choose each other every single day, magic happens. Not the fairy tale kind of magic, but the real kind, the kind that lasts forever. Did Esther and Jae-hyun's love story touch your heart? If you believe in the power of true love that breaks all barriers, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more beautiful romance stories. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment from Esther and Jae-hyun's journey. Was it their first meeting, their first kiss, or when Jae-hyun proposed under the stars? Share your thoughts, subscribe to Afro-Korean Stories, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next heartwarming story. Remember, love sees no color, no status, no boundaries, only the heart. Until next time, keep believing in love.